The plaintiff respectfully submits that Mexican state bears international responsibility for the forced disappearance of Mr. Antonio Gonzalez Mendez because, despite ratifying the American Convention and the Inter-American Convention of Forced Disappearance, the state failed to prevent, investigate, and punish those responsible for this disappearance. Second one, the investigation was marred by serious omissions, unjustified delays, lost evidence, and clear indications of the state acquiescence or tolerance toward armed civilian groups operating in Chiapas at the time. The state has not established that non-state actors were responsible. Instead, available facts and witness accounts suggest involvement or coordination with the local authorities. The state's remedial measures instituted years later, cannot cure the persistent impunity and initial investigate negligence. The plaintiff requests the court to reorganize the dispute as forced disappearances order and exhaustive investigation implemented institutional reforms provide reposing and guarantee on repetition. Well, the background and the circumstances or the plaintiff facts. Victim and environment Mr. Antonio Gonzalez Mendez, a resident of Chiapas, disappeared the 18th January 1999. Prior to his disappearance, regional actors documented increased hostility, surveillance, and threats against civilians connected to the social movement. Presence or armed civilian groups through the 19th, multiple reports by NGOs and the IACHR documented preliminary groups in Chiapas operating with the acquiescence or tolerance of local authorities, sometimes receiving logistical or tactical support. Event description: witness informed local authorities that armed civilian associations with the region's paramilitary groups and has been active to the area night or disappearance. These claims were never adequately investigated, nor were the group's leaders summoned, detained, or questioned. Plaintiff stance: the victim's family immediately filed complaints and provided details, but state agents failed to initiate timely, serious investigative measures, leaving critical hours and days unused, compromising the chances of finding Mr. Gonzalez alive or recognizing evidence. Contrary to the state narrative, the plaintiffs will demonstrate a pattern or grave omissions including delaying investigative response. Authorities waited days before considering meaningfully search, no immediately permitted control, site protection, or foreseen prevention occurred. Lack of the forcing rigor. Expert terms arrived late, lacked proper equipment, and failed to record chain of custody procedure. Multiple documents shows missing documentary and altered records. And I have a big list of these mistakes. For example, lack of serious follow-up. New evidence, witness statement, and foreseen advances were either ignored or incorporated superficially, producing non-real advances. The plaintiffs will present record showing system failure, not isolated mistakes. Mexico is bound by American Convention of Human Rights obligations to protect life, person integrity, liberty, juridical guarantees, and juridical protection. Inter-American conviction or forced disappearance or person, duty to prevent, investigate, punish, and remedy forced disappearance. Inter-American Court jurisprudence. which affirms that delay, omissions, or superficial investigation constitute a violation. Disappearance is a continuous violation until the victim is located. Attribution is possible even without direct participation or state agents with authorities fail to act with due diligence. The plaintiff asserts that Mexico violates the Article 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 25th of the ACHR and Articles 1 and 2 of the Forced Disappearances Convention. Evidence strengthens in the plaintiff's position. A testimonial and documentary evidence of negligence witness statements showing early were ignored. Well, the anticipated legal arguments for the plaintiff, the presumption of the state involvement is disappearances. According to the establishes the IACHR, the jurisprudence, when the state fails to conduct timely, serious investigations, the presumption shifts toward state responsibility. Due diligence failure as grounds to international responsibility. The state's omissions include delay, poor preservation of evidence, and failure to follow logical leads constitute violations even in the perpetration are private actors. Constructive acquiescence or tolerance. The state allowed paramilitary groups to operate with impunity on these environments, facilitating their disappearance. This certifies the criteria attribution through tolerance. Continuous violation doctrine. The disappearances continue to this day, thus Mexico remains in violation of obligations each day this truth is not established. The plaintiffs will request the admission of family members of Mr. Gonzalez to describe the events, the irregularities, and the institutional mismemorements. The local witness to testify about the presence of armed groups and their interactions with the police. The forensic and investigation experts to evaluate the investigation defects, and the human rights specialists to contextualize Chiapas' political climate and the state tolerance of non-state armed groups. Honorable judges of the Inter-American Court, we stand here to the 26 years without justice, without answers about the fate of Antonio Gonzalez Mendez. The disappearances is undisputed. What the plaintiff demonstrate in this state failure not only to prevent this disappearance, but investigate it with the urgency and seriousness required under the international law. Authorities did not secure the scene, lost critical evidence, ignored leads, contradicted one another, and failed to follow basic forensic principles. This was not an isolated error. This was a systemic collapse of the duty to protect. The court has abundant evidence that in Chiapas armed civilian groups operate with state acquiescence. These actions were predictable, their presence known, yet the state failed to control them. The conclusion: until Mexico fulfills its obligation, disappearances remains ongoing and the victim's suffering and that his family remains under arrest. The plaintiff asks this court for ruling that upholds the dignity, rights, and humanity of Mr. Gonzalez and his loved ones. Thank you so much. As a final observation, these disappearances of Antonio Gonzalez Mendez is not an administrative irregularity or an unfortunate accident. It is a grave human right violation for which the state bears responsibility through omissions, tolerance, or armed groups and enduring impunity. The plaintiffs respectfully request that court recognize this responsibility and order measures that finally brings truth, justice, and reparation, not just for Mr. Gonzalez, for their family and all the people in the country of Mexico. Thank you so much.